Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Rafson. I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs here at the GSD. And on behalf of our Public Programs team, which includes Raquel Rivera and Matt Smith, we're thrilled to welcome you to tonight's lecture by Dorte Mandrup. It's lovely to see so many of you here in the theater, and there are many more who are joining through the live stream. Welcome. To that end, I'd like to point out that live captioning is available for both live and online audiences, so just follow these simple instructions on the screen, but if you have any issues with that, don't hesitate to ask Matt in the AV booth for support. But looking ahead, I do want to share a couple of the next two public programs to come back to in this theater. On Thursday, February 20th, we'll host a screening of the documentary film Sitting Still, a portrait of landscape architect Laurie Olin and the social vision behind his practice. He'll be in conversation with the director, Gina Angeloni, and we'll have a reception to follow in the portico, so I hope you can make it. And after that, on Tuesday, March 4th, architect and activist Deanna Van Buren will deliver the Jacqueline Turwitt Urban Design Lecture entitled Designing for Abolition. Deanna will be joined on stage in conversation with Andrea James of the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. You can find details on those events and many, many more this spring on the GSD's website. And now, please join me in welcoming Grace Law, Chair of the Department of Architecture, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you all for being here tonight. You know, it's been quite heartbreaking over the last several weeks to learn of all the people in distress due to the devastation of the recent fires in Los Angeles. As a designer, I have also felt the profound loss in the built environment, erasing structures that once embodied bold visions of the future. And as chair of the GSD's Department of Architecture, I'm grateful to our faculty who participated in recent conversations on the urgent subject of resiliency in our new core colloquium. And it was specifically focusing in this case on the West Coast. The destruction in LA serves as a reminder of the fragility of our built environment, particularly in an era of escalating ecological threats. We welcome tonight Dorte Mandrup, whose strong architectural forms are deftly infused with this state of vulnerability. Dorte is this spring's Kenzō Tange visiting chair, a professorship established in 1983 by the Tange family to honor the late Japanese architect and urban designer Kenzō Tange. Over the past 4 decades, the Tange chair has brought world-renowned architects to the GSD as visiting critics. We are really quite grateful to the Tange family for this support. A graduate of Denmark's Aarhus School of Architecture, Dorte formed her Copenhagen-based studio in 1999. Her practice pursues what she has described as an irreplaceable architecture, designed so entwined with their context that they could not exist anywhere else. In a field often dominated by globalized aesthetics and universal forms, she reminds us of the power of the local. Designs that emerge not just from the needs of a site, but also from its character, stories, and complexities. Yet, as much as her work is deeply grounded in place, it is also brimming with imaginative possibility. Dorte's work has been recognized internationally with numerous awards, including the Finn Jewel Architecture Award in 2018 and the Berliner Kunstpreis in Architecture in 2019. The Global Award for Sustainable Architecture, which Dorte won in 2022, honors her commitment to integrating ecological consciousness into the built environment. In a world increasingly defined by ecological precarity, brought close to mind by the recent fires, Dorte's projects invite us to think critically about how we build in fragile environments, how we preserve cultural memory, and how we reconcile the past with the demands of the present. Her projects consider a building not as a standalone object, but as a part of a larger ecological and historical set of systems. Her designs express a dialogue between the built and the unbuilt, the seen and the unseen. Last spring, while riding bikes through Copenhagen with the studio that I co-taught with James Dahlman, we were delighted to come upon one of Dorte's early projects, a building nicknamed the Crystal, for its translucent, glowing polycarbonate skin. This sports and culture center, which also features a very cheery, bright green interior, is considered a notable example of asset-based community development, as distinct for its social conception as it is for its glowing lantern-like quality. The building is also called Prismen, demonstrating Dorte's predilection for prismatic volumes. Dorte's use of formal abstraction is sometimes metaphorical, for example, reminiscent of a whale or a mountainous landscape or a crystal. And so perhaps her work can be understood as the ultimate sign form building, in which the building form signifies something quite literal. This raises disciplinary questions about how will architecture be conceived. The title of a conversation held in this very room 7 years ago. On that occasion, two of our former chairs, Raphael Moneo and Harry Cobb, alongside guest Peter Eisenman, explored the idea that if architecture is no longer debating modernism versus postmodernism, then perhaps architecture is about abstraction versus phenomena. Dorte's buildings prompt us to speculate on how our work might interweave abstraction as intellection and phenomena as feeling, contextual sensitivity, while maintaining a greater awareness of the interdependence between human and non-human systems. In an age of climate crisis, her projects especially foreground architecture's potential as a tool for environmental stewardship. They ask nuanced questions in light of our uncertain future. How can architecture support biodiversity? How do we build in ways that honor materials and landscapes? And how do we create structures that are both resilient and responsive? Dorte is equally committed to exploring these questions through teaching, holding a faculty appointment at Cornell in 2018 and at Accademia de Arquitectura de Mendrisio in Switzerland since 2021. At the GSD, her students will study waste and water on a formal industrial site in Copenhagen's harbor. It's worth reflecting on the resonance of Dorte's work with our own pedagogical concerns here at the GSD. Like Dorte, we are committed to interrogating architectural practice as a means of reflecting on culture and environment. Her work offers to us a compelling vision for how architecture might not only respond to the challenges of our time, but actively reshape our fundamental narratives and systems. Please join me in welcoming Dorte Mandrup.
Thank you so much, Grace, for a beautiful introduction. Thank you. In our studio, we talk about the irreplaceable not as the architecture that we are doing, but the irreplaceable place, the place that we are working in. We do try to look upon every site or every place we're at as something that could be irreplaceable or that we could underline as being irreplaceable. So in a way, context is queen or king, and then the architecture will somehow follow whatever we find in context. And I think that the global climate crisis is really our global context. So of course we need to work that as well as looking at the local. I chose to bring projects from only from the north. Some of them are from the Arctic, some of them are just northern, and they're all landscape-related projects. It doesn't mean that we're not working in urban context. It's just as important to us. But I thought maybe it would be nice to have something that was all landscape-related here. So, except for one. So we're going to look at a Danish, very horizontal landscape of the Wadden Sea, Arctic Norway, Arctic Greenland, Arctic Canada, and then a historic site in Germany. And I think actually that's a mistake because I took it out, so we're not going to look at that. So if we start in Denmark, on the west coast of Denmark, Denmark is a very small country, only 5 million people, but it has very different landscapes. A lot of it is islands. There's a very long coastline, and everything is pretty horizontal. No mountains, no rocks. And the Wadden Sea is one of the places that is unique because it's UNESCO heritage because it is one of the most important feeding sites for migrating birds coming from the tundra in the north and going all the way to Africa. So, and the reason why it is so important is because the tide is the land is very low, or the sea bottom is very low, and the tide is very high. So the landscape changes all the time, and it leaves a lot of food for the birds. It's also the outskirts of Denmark. There's not a lot of work here, but there is some tourism, and people are coming here to pick oysters at low tide, or to watch this phenomenon, which we call black sun. I think it's called starling magic, and it's about these millions of birds. When there's a predator in the air, they will rise and make these amazing formations. And this happens, of course, only in the fall and in the spring. So that's part of the tourist attraction. So it's also old Viking area. Ribe, which is the closest town nearby, was the first Viking trading town. So the Vikings came from the north of Norway all the way down, and there was a lot of trade going on here. So the Vikings would build the longhouses like this, with reed on the roof, and a timber construction, and kind of rammed earth walls. So the existing center looked like this. So it's actually a transformation that we had to do, or a refurbishment, an extension of this existing building that would house an exhibition on the migrating birds. And there's a very important foundation in Denmark called Realdania, which is facilitating architecture also on certain programs, and this was on trying to bring more workplaces to the west coast of Denmark, and supporting this place. So we did a competition, and this 90s sort of postmodern building was not really close to the regional architecture or to the landscape. So we decided to reuse it as much as possible. The budget was really low, and by keeping all facilities like bathrooms and kitchen, etc., we could save some money on the budget, which was very pragmatic. So how to work with that building, so without, in a way, have the feeling of being an extension or being a different building. We discussed it as an embracement. So we put the new building around the old building, and in a way created a new and sort of supersized farm topology that was known around the area, the farm topology, not the supersized. And as you can see here, you have the existing building sort of embraced by the new building, and by doing that, we could create a circulation that was natural, starting and ending at the cafeteria, which is always important, I guess, for the revenue of having a museum. And then we, in a way, tried to understand the materiality of the site as both a landscape, but also as being something that had a relationship to the historic farmhouses, but also to the Viking history. So reeds are growing quite close by, and since reeds are, as both, of course, are very, it's a biogene material, but it's also doing really, really well with the salty air that's here, and is also doing really well in these open landscapes with no trees. So we decided to work with the reed as a sort of abstract cladding on the facade and the roof of the building. And in a way, the interesting thing is that the craftsmanship around working with reeds and thatching roofs hasn't changed very much since the Vikings. The only thing is that you are using a board to push the reed into place, and then you slice it, but you're mainly kind of shaping the reed by hitting it with a board. In the Viking age, they would have a stick, and of course they wouldn't have like metal tidings. So you have this kind of handmade texture or quality to the surface here, and which is at the same time patinating in the same colors and the same hues as the landscape. One thing that's really important in Denmark altogether is to create protection from the wind, because we have a lot of wind, and to create this microclimate around a building is important. But when you are out here in the Wadden Sea, you have the enormous surface, and the wind is kind of unstopped by anything. So it's really windy here. So when you work with the diagonal shapes, you make the wind come over the building and over the inner courtyard. So in that way, working with the roofs and with no vertical, you can actually create a really central courtyard with a totally different microclimate. So that's partly also why we work with these very diagonal lines. But it's also to make it in a way appear directly from the landscape. And of course, creating protection for the entrance and ensuring that you can actually meet here without getting wet or being blown away by the wind. The interior courtyard and the existing building, we decided to clad in Robinia wood, which is Central European, quite small, but very, very sturdy wood, and the thing with the Robinia is that it's extremely oily, so it's almost behaving like teak, but without ruining rainforest. It's also very, very lively material, so it kind of tends to bend if you work in large pieces, so you need to work with it in really, really small pieces. It's still actually bending. So the interior is very abstract, since we wanted to yield for the content of the exhibition and not being too present with the materiality. So all of the exhibition spaces all have some kind of contact with the exterior, and it has daylight, but it's also very abstract. Next project is also a landscape project. It's in Greenland. Some of you have heard about it. And Greenland is really Arctic, because when you go to Arctic Norway, you have the Gulf Stream going along the coast. That's also why Denmark is relatively mild, because of the Gulf Stream. But in Greenland, you don't have the Gulf Stream, and you really have Arctic climate. So this is kind of reality. We are 300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle in Ilulissat, and most of the year you have snow, you have also extreme cold, but this has been a historic town since the 17th century, and there's been Inuit here for thousands of years. And the reason why it's been a settlement is because you have a very, very fertile bay And the reason why this bay is so fertile is because you have a calving glacier, and the glacier will bring minerals into the water, and so you will have lots of fish. You have huge wells, and this was one of the main whaling stations in the 17th century, bringing whale oil to light the streets and in Paris, among other places. So the Greenlandic population is 56,000 people. It's not more than a small town altogether. The biggest city is Nuuk, with almost 20,000 people, and this is the capital of Greenland. And Ilulissat is the second largest with 5,000 people and 4,500 dogs. And it's not, you know, it's not for fun that you have dogs. It's because it's a really great mobility tool in the wintertime, because there's no road, of course, and this is the easiest way of getting transported. The building culture is, of course, not a building culture because Inuit is nomadic people. So what you see here is what the Norwegians and the Danes brought in the 17th century. Is like small, in a way, small IKEA like houses, like kind of flat pack that was shipped up there and erected very wisely usually on top of a hill, so you had the meltwater running not underneath the building in the summertime, but otherwise the most sort of local building tradition is that all of these houses has really bright, amazing colors. But it's in a way not an Inuit culture. It's like a Scandinavian culture that's brought to Greenland. So the ice fjord is it's a place that a lot of tourists would come to see because of its beauty, but it's also the place where you would understand that the climate change is really happening, because the glacier, and this is a summer photo, and what you see here is sometimes a little bit difficult to understand, but the glacier here is, all of this is the ice cap. And you all know that the ice cap is melting, and the ice cap has, I think, 56% of the ice, the water that is ice in the world, and it's melting off. And the glacier edge is here. So the glacier has always been carving off icebergs, but in a balance, because the new snow is coming, but that's not happening anymore. So it's carving off, and then the icebergs are kind of moving out here and into the Disco Bay, where they carve off once again, because there's a ridge in the bottom of the sea that actually prevents the iceberg from immediately sailing out into the Disco Bay. So you have this amazing and very beautiful compression of icebergs in an enormous scale, and you have them carving off once again here. So here you see the glacier, how it's, this is the edge of the glacier and the edge of the ice cap moving backwards, and it's doing, this is 2014, I think, and it's exponentially moving backwards. So it's also the place where people come to see the reality of climate change. So the center, the Icefjord Center is focusing on the importance of ice and climate change and Inuit culture as well. So again, this is a competition, and coming to the site, it was really disappointing. We couldn't even see the ice fjord. So, but then coming out to the edge, this is a summer photo, of course. So you have all the icebergs here, and I think the scale is kind of, you can't really communicate how big this is, but it's enormous. So since this center was about the ice fjord, we really wanted to create a building that was also exhibiting one-to-one the ice fjord. So we decided to cantilever the building as much as we could over the edge of the hill, and then because this place is snowy, or there's snow there for 10 months a year, of course understanding the movement. Sorry, moving back. Okay, so understanding how snow behaves in the wind, because when it's this cold, the precipitation is not that high. Snow will fall, and then it will be blown around. And so understanding how the snow moves with the wind is extremely important. So one of the mistakes would be to create protection from the wind at the entrances, and that would of course create snow buildup behind, because when the wind comes and the snow blows over here, then as soon as you have protection from the wind, the snow will fall down and make these enormous snow buildup. So you don't want to do that. So you don't want to create that. And so studying that, and also in studying the models that we did in a wind tunnel with potato flour was kind of part of the how to design this. Of course, the cantilevering was an important part, but also how we placed this boomerang exactly was depending on how the snow was building up. So here we get a little bit of snow buildup here and here, and that's how we ended with the shape of the building. It's also twisted on the facade, so you make this aerodynamic shape on the facade, meaning that the facade is blown free of snow during the winter, because the prevailing winds are mainly from here. And then, of course, lifting up the building, you have melt water, lots of it, when the snow melts in the end of May. So lifting up the building was extremely important. Then there's another relationship, I think, to this site, is that one of the things is that that Greenland is probably the oldest rock in the world. So lots of geologists goes up here to discover, and it's standing against the oldest rock in the world. You know, how do you do a building here? So we wanted to make a building that was as lightweight as possible, and in a way had a temporary feel. So it was also relating to the Inuit culture, which is much more about creating lightweight tools, as light as possible, because you're carrying them around from the summer to the winter places. So the idea was, in a way, to try to create the building more like a skeleton of an animal, or a skeleton of a kayak, or a tool. And then another important thing was to try to understand how the building would work in a kind of daily life with the locals. So there's a movement from the small town here out and into the. There's a lot of trails. It's kind of like almost like a national park, and you can go hiking here. And this is widely used by also local people after work. In the summertime, of course, you have 24 hours of daylight, so that's a different rhythm than the winter time. So creating the roof as part of the path, and in a way making it part of daily life, but also maybe creating a place where you could get protection from the wind on your trips. So half of the building is in a way just covered outdoor span, and the other half is here. So you have always protection against west and east, and it's actually widely used. People are even biking. If you have on my mountain bikes here, they're also skiing in the winter. And by placing it here, and when you move up, you see the ice fjord for the first time up here, and you can move down into the other side, and somehow almost ritual that you kind of you get an overview when you're moving into the wilderness. So. Moving up on the roof, and then discovering the ice fjord, and then moving down on the other side. So when you build in the Arctic and when you build in Greenland, all materials have to be shipped here, and that means that we had to prepare for this building to be shipped in containers. The economy is very much about how many containers and how you pack things. So the framework and the facade, everything was done in Denmark, prefabbed and packed and shipped to Greenland, and was erected in 2 months, which is kind of the window you have before snow starts to fall again. And then they worked on the interior of the house for the rest of the year. And originally it was created as a full timber frame structure, but because of climate change, there's no permanent frost anymore in Ilulissat, and it means that you have a very big difference between thaw and ice. And that means that you have a lot of temperature differences and a lot of condensation. So we didn't dare to do this because we were afraid the timber wouldn't last for long. So it's a main construction in steel, and the rest of the building is in wood and timber. So the dream was that this place was also used as a cultural house out of season by the locals, and one of the really happy pictures is this is a wedding on top of the roof, and this is not something we initiated. So it's actually getting used by the community in all kinds of different ways, and this is a dance performance in the outdoor covered area. So moving into the building, you have, in most of the year you would have spikes on your shoes. So it's important, part of the culture, you take off your shoes when you go inside. So this creating this kind of interior large place where you can change your shoes or you can take off your shoes before you move in to the exhibition, which is fully daylit and is just as much about the exterior, the ice fjord, as the interior exhibition. And the kind of centerpiece here is an ice core, and I think most of you know that the ice cores that you drill into the ice cap can tell everything about how the climate has been, and every kind of event that has happened through history. You can see the Industrial Revolution, you can see a lot of things in the ice cores. So this is kind of the first time an ice core is exhibited, because it's of course difficult to exhibit ice. And they have to change the core, I think, also because it's melting off a little bit. So also creating these kind of multi-purpose spaces that, because you don't have shoes on, you can actually use the floor. You can sit sort of almost everywhere. So it's very, it's actually used quite a lot as a cultural place where different kinds of events are going on. And yeah, this is actually the geologist that discovered that the Earth was a lot older than we thought. And of course, the winter is also, people think that the Arctic is dark. I think I saw this crime series, True Detective, that was supposed to be going on in the Arctic. It was very, very dark, but of course, it's never really dark in the wintertime because you have the reflection from the snow, and of course you also have. So this is kind of the darkest, but of course creating this kind of glow in the dark as an anchor in this enormous landscape is important. So you have this kind of protected space, and of course this is also a reality from. For the 6 months, and actually also more. So more and more tourists are coming here to see this amazing thing. And of course, you can't you can't take pictures because it's moving. It's worth it going up there just for this. Then it's actually the sun is not up from the 30th of November until the 12th of January. So when the sun comes up for the first time, people gather on the hills and on the roof of the building to cherish the first sun, which is up for 40 minutes, and then actually goes pretty fast towards midnight sun in the summertime. It's very touching somehow, this event. So, next Arctic place is Norway, northern Norway, also 300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, but as you can see, very, very different. It's green, you have trees, of course there's snow, etc., but it's not as harsh as the Greenlandic or Canadian Arctic. So this again was a competition. It's about a building that is exhibiting whales from a cultural point of view, and also, of course, a natural history point of view. And the reason why it makes sense to place a building around whales, this exact spot, is that the big tooth whales need a lot of depth to be able to live off the big octopuses that live on 1,500 meters depth. And as you can see, you have an enormous valley in the sea bottom going all the way to Andenes, which is where this is placed. So this is the place to go see whales, because you can have the big tooth whales going very, very close to the coast. And this is sperm whales that you can see, but you can see all kinds of whales here. So it's a local initiative. So the locals they actually managed to find the funding for this building, and they did the competition. Then they did the competition. Then they got the funding, this kind of peninsula, which is in a way on the edge of the small town. Again, I think 3,500 people. They had a military base that was closed down, and they somehow needed something else to make workplaces. So more tourism is really important for this place. And the peninsula here was in a way part of the recreational area for the small town here, and the program was almost kind of almost as large as the site, and which was in a way quite invasive for the place. So what we decided to do was to imagine the surface of the Earth, or the crust of the Earth, as something that continued and was part of the sea bottom, or the landscape on the sea bottom. So imagining that you could incise and lift up the skin of the Earth, or the crust, and actually tuck the museum underneath this to still, in a way, keep the site as a recreational site, was part of this. And then, so quite simply, using the site as a floor. So following all the different height curves inside the building, so we don't have any base or any foundation visible, and then creating this shell, sort of an abstraction of the hill, and then this meandering wall is in a way creating daylight space and dark spaces for more immersive video installations, etc. So the idea was actually not to make something look like a well, but we discovered that from one place of the sea you can actually think that this looks like a well, or like a whale with its tail up. But to be honest, that was a kind of that wasn't the intention at first. It was mainly the idea of using that connection between land surface and sea bottom as a main idea. And the interior, of course, you have the dark spaces, and because it's softly curved, it's also very good for projections, etc. And then you have the direct connection with the landscape and the sea on the outside. Yeah, this is actually we are working on this project right now, and this well is actually going to be exhibited in another space, an enclosed space, but. And then, trying to in a way follow any kind of curve in the landscape, and by doing that, creating a direct connection. The curved glass is, of course, important because it creates an abstraction. This doesn't feel like a glass surface. If it's much more like sort of a blurry vision. Of course, this is cheating. We're working very hard on this detail to make it look natural, but of course it's not. And then creating this again, this public space on the roof, and giving it back in a way to the local community and the tourist. And here you can see the midnight sun, but also. The northern light, and you can of course also study the whales not that close to the coast, but you can see them far out. Another Arctic project is this Norrøna Lodge, which is north of Andenes, where the well is placed. Is actually 100 kilometers or so north of that, and this is a commercial project. It's a tourist, it's a hotel, but it's for a very special client that wants to work with adventure in a sustainable way, and they also they are actually their main business is to make clothing for skiing and hiking, etc. And now they're moving into this adventure business. We're trying to bring people into places like this in the Arctic, skiing, boating, etc. And so this is me, I think, on the side. And it's amazingly beautiful, amazingly cold, very windy place. And so walking along the beach, you move towards this island that was a former fish factory, and later on, in a way, changed, sort of very homemade by a bunch of artists that sort of recreated the place in a very temporary way, and then sold it off to the client. So it looks very romantic, and it is romantic, but it's also like almost not holding up. It's standing out in the sea, and everything here is rotten. So we have to take that building down. Yeah. So the idea is to create 35 rooms. And to in a way work with the stone on the side, the slate, and also creating in a way a relationship to the water, very very close to the water. So here's the small bridge, and underneath of these big slabs or stones, you have the restaurant, and you have the rooms. And as you can see on this render here, this is existing, but otherwise the rest is in a way conceived as these big slate surfaces. Of course, winter is one way of staying here. It's one way of being in the Arctic, and summer is a very different way, because you have the midnight sun and activities all all night long here. So, so this is sort of basically the restaurant up here, and then each of these lodges houses 2 people. It's like a double room, and there's a few lodges on this side as well. And then you have activities along boating bridge, kayaks, etc. And you have the possibility of bringing people here with a boat. And then again, using the roof as part of the terrain and part of the path. And then trying to, because of course we need to be high enough not to be flooded, but still close enough to the water to feel part of it. So we're working very hard on how to actually work this whole inclination. And then the restaurant up here again works a little bit like Anhalter Bahnhof's tea house in Porto, where you have, you enter and then you have the full view and you can move downwards towards the water. So thank you for that, Caesar. And again, the roofs, in a way, hiding the rooms underneath. Yeah, this is the very rough render. And the restaurant and the kind of outdoor terraces. And then, yeah, in a way, creating shelter and entrance spaces that's also taking winter and cold and draft, etc., and also is open enough for the summertime. So sauna down here, very important, Scandinavia, and then the restaurant kind of moving slowly downwards. Yeah, it must be winter, ski boots. Yeah. So working again with the natural stone as much as possible, and then timber frames and CLT. The room's quite simple. You kind of on a natural shelf here on the rock, and then you move in, being compressed, and then having the openness to the sea. Again, timber CLT construction, and with the stone slabs on top. Yes, of course, nice view, and in a way, kind of a lining of tree towards the wood towards the rock. So, another Arctic place, which is Nunavut, in Arctic Canada. It's the last territory in Canada that was actually created in '96, and this is the Inuit territory. There's 70,000 Inuit living here in a really, really vast area. And of course, Inuit in Canada and Inuit in Greenland are related, because Inuit in Greenland came from Canada, so they have the same language and are very related now. There are also planes going from Iqaluit to Nuuk, and there's a lot of cultural interaction. So Iqaluit is actually not like Ilulissat, which was kind of a natural site because there was hunting and there was fishing and there was whaling and everything. Iqaluit is there because there was an American air base here in '42, and so that airstrip is in a way the only contact to the outside world, because it's even the sea here is even more close by ice. There's only 1 month a year where the sea is open and you can actually ship things in. So the airstrip is important, and because it's that important, it's also the capital of Nunavut with 7,000 people. It doesn't have the same feeling of being anchored to the landscape. It's more sort of barracks, and you can almost see it here, with these quite large buildings that somehow belong to the air base. But when you study Inuit culture, there's and it's almost like a cliche. You know, there's 1,000 words for or 100 words for snow in Greenlandic or in Inuktitut, but there is. I mean, the snow is really important, and reading how the snow is shaped is very, very important to find your way. So if you're out and there's a whiteout or it's night, you have to be able to find your way home. And as you can see, it's not easy. There's not a lot of things that you can actually put your wayfinding on. So the way the snow is shaped is part of that, and is a very sort of is a very important understanding of where you are in the world. So this again was a competition. It's a competition for Inuit Heritage Center, and it's about getting your heritage back from the museums down south, which is Toronto, Ottawa, and other places. So these collections are of extreme importance to Inuit, both because, of course, it's heritage, but also because the heritage is in a way smoldering very, very fast. The knowledge of how to survive, how to hunt, how to survive in the snow is very fast disappearing, because there's not like a tradition of writing books and instruction books, etc. Everything is kind of in spoken words, and it's more learning from seeing than anything. So getting the heritage back and being able to create a sort of alive heritage in a way by having the older people teaching the younger people, and by studying all of the objects, there's kind of an urgent importance in creating a place like this. So what we decided was to, again, this understanding of Inuit culture as being nomadic has been, when it's been interpreted by Western architects, it's always kind of like there's an igloo, or which is in a way very strange, because igloos are not permanent. They're only there for a few days and then you move on. So again, we tried to look at how the wind direction and the landscape worked, and so the wind direction is along the facade here, and in a way, by creating the building again as a slit, but in a different way than the well, as a slit in the landscape, we could create a building that has a lot of view towards the town and the bay, but also could protect. There's a lot of archive that needs to be protected, and you need to have a very constant climate here. So it could be natural to have archives in the back of the building. And then again, letting the wind sweep over the surface, so you don't have snow buildup. And then working with the front plaza. I mean, if you work like this, you will get snow buildup. But if you work like this, you get the wind around the edge, and you can accelerate it. So this is how it looked at the competition. It's changed a lot. Actually, the site has also changed. Who knows how it's going to look in the end? But again, having this beacon in the dark, but being part of the landscape, and sort of, yeah. And the interiors, we're working very much on that, but it's again because we have the timber construction and the stone cladding. And this kind of the openness towards the town. A lot of the activities are in the front of the facade here, and then the museum part and the archives and the things that needed protection is in the back here. And then just to bring you back to Copenhagen, and this is it's a very sort of it's a municipal project, so it's really kind of daily life. But this is a Center for Diabetes and Heart Diseases in the center of Copenhagen. It's right where you have this is where the research, the medical research is happening. Here you have the Old People's Town, it's called. It's like an old people's facility of a nursing home. And then you have like, the housing blocks of Copenhagen, very typical with the enclosed courtyards. And the site is here along a very typical block. And of course, somehow people living in these blocks has been used to a quite open area. And this area, the Old People's Town, is also part of people's recreational area in the center. So when we did the competition, it was very much about how to relate to these pockets of green along this very sort of dense neighborhood, or the edge of this dense neighborhood, and how to also not block the access to the Old People's Town here. So what we did, this is a low building that was torn down, and we reused the bricks, keeping this site open, and actually stack the program as much as we could, and create this possibility of actually moving into the Old People's Town along the edge here, and creating a small green pocket along the street was kind of the main idea. So it's curving in to create this pocket and entrance, and actually the passage through here. Then the program was extremely big, and somehow too big for the site. The program is about teaching how to exercise and to eat right and to cook with healthy food, etc. So it's a lot of counseling. People with diabetes have a lot of also side illnesses, and people with heart diseases has also side illnesses. So it's all about, it's not about treatment like a hospital. It's about preventing and changing lifestyle in a way. So there's three different sizes exercise gymnastic halls. And there's a big kitchen, exercise kitchen. There's different rooms for counseling. There's of course also a doctor and a, I don't know what you call that, but it's a person that takes care of your feet. Feet therapist. Anyway, because that's part of having diabetes, is to get problems with your feet. So the main idea in the beginning was in a way to have all the public functions, or more public functions, and then all the offices, because there's also a lot of boring offices implied, and then trying to create these kind of green spots. But there wasn't really enough space for that, so we ended up deciding to create a basement floor with one of the big halls for gymnastics or for exercise here, another one on top, and then creating this full interior space where everybody could meet and where everything comes together. Very simple, trying to scale down the building because again it was a little bit too big for the site. So scale it down and to make it by creating a roof. And then creating these the double height, the big volumes, kind of underground, but with contact to the exterior, and then having the garden on one side and having the street on the other, sort of different facades, and then so again creating these frames as a very visible part of the construction system. Is a timber construction with a aluminum cladding and solar panels all along this roof, and then sort of two parts of the building with this hard space in between. And as you see, it's quite crammed. It's quite close to the existing building here, and then in a way creating offices on the third floor. In Denmark, it's not legal to have offices that do not have direct contact to the outdoors and do not have daylight. So in a way, cheating as much as possible here with the offices, but still keeping the roof down, making it look like a two-story building. So the entrance space, you can enter from both sides, from the street and from the courtyard, and so this is kind of a triple height space you enter into. You have a staircase that's also used as an auditorium on one side, the training kitchen here, a small gymnastics hall, and then pushing the offices further back to the building, and then you have the big gymnastics hall here with a small balcony. And daylight from here. And so the interior space, in a way, is very colored by the use of the timber frames. And as you probably know, you need to dimension the timber frames to be able to hold the fire. So yeah, you over-dimension, and then you don't need to treat them with anything, or you can keep them exposed. So everything is kind of a little bit present here. And then the connecting bridge between the two sides, and the meeting boxes or the meeting balconies here. And so everything is in a way detached from the timber frames, and it's very sort of easy to understand as a tectonic. So the bridge was too long we didn't want to have columns in the hard space to kind of create barriers. So it's hanging from the ceiling. And basement, of course. So of course, the basement needs to be concrete, but everything above that is timber. And coming up again, first floor, the secondary gymnastics hall on top of the first one, and then creating these sort of waiting niches along the construction, because there's these consultant rooms here where you are sort of one-on-one consultants. So and the office is behind the doctor and the foot doctor, and on the other side you have like a big multi-purpose space, and then the office in the back. Yeah. An office space. That's it. Thank you. I would be really, really happy if you had just a question or two, or three or four. Feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Dorte. That was an amazing talk. Thank you so much for sharing all of your work with us. Maybe I will start us off with the questions. It was wonderful to see this boomerang shape at the beginning of the lecture and then at the end of the lecture in a context, of course, of an intense landscape, but then in the context of an urban condition. So I was and then I was also struck by the fact that the work seems to be derived so much out of the close reading of topography, which then, as you build the design, as you think through the design, becomes part of the way in which you're thinking about the section of the building being quite a bit topographic. And then, of course, to see your drawings, which show all of the interesting contour lines that build up that site, and that provide you with the kind of way in which you're thinking about the work. So I suppose I'm curious to understand where in your process that very close reading of contour, of topographic shape, enters in, because again, then when we see that boomerang shape emerging in the last project, of course, completely different, but seems like it's part of a formal idiom that you're studying. So I would love it if you could share some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I guess that when we start, I mean, of course, we're a team, and so when we start working, we would always kind of try to keep emotionally detached in a way. So we are, always trying to keep away, keeping our emotions away from the sketching as long as possible. But while we kind of try to gather information on the site. So understanding, of course, there's priorities, and some sites have more cultural information, some have more, topographic information. But in a way, try to gather as much as possible, and then in a way, like looking at what's on the table, and then you could start in a way being personal or emotional about the sketching. So what we usually do is to, in a way, test, again, keeping your mind open as long as possible, to kind of test 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different possibilities of solving the initial or the prioritized problems is, in a way, part of that. It's a slow method of working, but then, working your way in, and then of course there's an intuitive choice. Is this right? Is it right for the place? Is the scale right? Is the that is kind of coming into the process? But I think we really try to keep rational and trying to understand everything we can around the site. So I think that's an important part of our method, because then you do get inspired in a way by the place or the material. We would always look, different things, but of course, if you're in Greenland or in the Arctic, the climate, and of course also the understanding of or trying. I'm not saying I'm understanding Inuit culture, but I try. Being humble in a way.
Can I follow up on that conveniently next to Grace with the microphone? It was extremely beautiful, and also very beautifully describing how you situate each of the projects. But I want to go back to the opening gambit where Grace made this contrast between abstraction and phenomenology and sort of positioned you as playing both sides. And I want to talk about the abstraction side, so it plays a little bit on what Grace was bringing up. And so in a kind of, let's say, a very gross version of history, don't tell the historians on our faculty that I'm doing this, that you can say architecture's relationship to abstraction starts with an attempt to really bring architecture down to the bare elements of floor, column, or structure, and vertical circulation, right? That there's the absolute elements of architecture. And then with computation, you have the possibility of abstraction allowing you to actually distort the distinction between a floor and a wall and turn into, work with continuous surfaces or torqued surfaces. And with your work, I can't tell how your use of formal abstraction is related to that sort of historical march, or if you're trying to sort of almost make architecture disappear, and it's partly because of then the material cladding that makes the distinction between a wall, a floor, a ceiling, but also between a building and nature disappear as much as possible. And so I guess the question is, what's the ambition to the abstraction, to the object, in terms of what's driving what in that game?
I think that's really a very interesting question, because I think there's there's a doubleness in the way, I think, which is both about the sculptural quality, of course, but at the same time it's about the creation of space with details in a way, or there's somehow an understanding of the sculptural qualities as a drawing, with lines or with that I'm trying to explore. I think that so in that sense, I think it's disturbing to understand the building as a. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of work that is the opposite, but to me it's disturbing to think of the wall and the ceiling and because it's like the material in a way is one, and that the relationship between wall and roof, when you do work with a roof that's not a horizontal surface, is somehow also it's becoming too much, I think, or it's disturbing in a way when you yes, that distinction, yeah. So I usually try to work against that.
Other questions? Microphone's running. Johnny, Karen.
Hello, Maya. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Jonathan, MArc1, and I'm particularly interested in your projects with the Inuit, so the one in Nunavut, for example, or in Greenland. And there's, I think, as you've mentioned briefly, there's been a clear shift between the vernacular of the skin and bone shelter in the summer and the igloo in the winter. And the vernacular today is a bit more like the prefabrication. And it's about the efficiency of packaging, in a way. So I wonder if, like, what, in your design process, what do you interpret as being vernacular, and how does it play a role in your design?
I try to avoid vernacular in this in the understanding of the vernacular being something that can only, that's a building tradition that you need to kind of make a replica of, but I think there's something in the vernacular understanding of, why does the building look like this? Because it's really windy, or because there's certain things that's creating the vernacular, and I think that's interesting, to understand. So I think that when we did the Wadden Sea Center, and that time nobody was interested in biogene materials. So I mean, it's not that long time ago, but it's still 10 years ago. And what we in a way tried to investigate was how to use that really traditional material in an abstract way. So I think the abstraction of the vernacular is interesting. Understanding why it looks like it looks. The Faroe Islands, it's all stone and turf, because you don't have any. There's no forest. There's no. So of course, it looks like that. So I think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained, but we try to not be sentimental in a way. Or you can easily, fall into that sentimental kind of thinking, which I really try to keep cool in a way.
Hi, Dorte. Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Rahul. I'm in the MArc1 program as well. For me, the most compelling part was all of the images and the drawings that had so much detail. So my question is, how do you decide what to draw, especially with this being most of these projects being so site-specific, and the site is not rational, it's not buildings that can't be measured, you can't survey, or maybe you can, but what does that process look like for you guys?
It looks like we're doing a lot in 3D, but we do a lot in models. We have a full equipped model shop. We do a lot in models and really crude cardboard models. So it's part of the process is really crude in a way. But I think that, and I somehow hate that demand that has come now that every time you do a competition, you need to be able to do a full scale 3D model of what your intentions are not that far. It's like suddenly you have to detail everything because otherwise there's no space. And I think that's really it's a big pressure, I think, on officers today, and I don't think it's fair because you can't develop. I mean, when we did the whale, when we came for the first meeting, then the client said, "I want you to make exactly that building," and I'm like, "Whoa, I don't know. Maybe it's better with we have to be able to develop things, and I think you kind of freeze architecture in this picture that you're creating in that moment. Then you don't. I mean, it's only after 2 months of work you don't know how things are going to develop. So I don't know if that's an answer. I think we do the renders because we have to, because our clients demand it. And we're starting to understand that the best render wins, which is really not fair. And so, that's reality. So, and also we have clients that now demand every time we have a meeting, so how does it look like? And it's like, yeah, here's a plan, or there's you can't do. You need to kind of produce renders all the time. You spend a lot of time doing that. So we try to make it into. In the process, we might try to make it into a design tool with different real-time render tools. But so it's also like, okay, we can actually use the renders. It's not something we only do to present. But I'm a 2D person. I hate when we discuss in design meetings details in 3D. Every time then people come up with this 3D render, and I'm like, but I can't see how big this is, or could you give me a 1 to 5 plan and section? Then I know exactly what scale, and nobody does that anymore. No, I think it's a loss. It's a loss of the understanding of detail that when you start to make them in 3D. Yeah. Okay, I'm old.
Hi, I'm Emma. Thank you so much for your presentation. When thinking about kind of building traditions in the Arctic, the recent, in terms of Western cycle of material failure is what really comes to mind first. And hearing about your consideration of climate and materials was amazing to hear about the steel and timber hybrid approach. And the unavoidable need of having to import all materials, and I'm assuming also importing labor for the building.
No.
No? Okay, nope. Amazing. But the importation of materials and access to that makes me wonder, is there a place in the design process for aftercare, maintenance, or if there isn't, could there be?
Luli said there's actually some, as you could see, the detailing was pretty good. There was really good contractors. They were local, but all material has to be shipped. And I think, I think climate change has been present for us for a long time, but it's kind of a wake-up thing. It's a wake-up call in a way. The last 5 years, how urgent this is. We really need to. This is really scientific, and we need to prove everything we do. And I think that's really important, that it's not becoming something emotional. So what we do is we do life cycle assessment on everything we do, from the sketching process. Of course, it's very crude, but. So and you get a shock when you really understand that some stuff you thought was sustainable is not sustainable, while other things are much more sustainable than you thought. But it's all about getting the embedded carbon as far down as possible, right now, because science is not going to save us, and we need to in a way upfront save a lot of carbon. So I think that's a new reality to me, and to I think most of the community, I guess, how urgent that is. And it's not, you have to accept design decisions that is not necessarily your first aesthetic decision. And I think that's probably one of the things. We're doing a school, a craftsman school in Jutland right now. We're using reused bricks, and there was a nursing home close by that was going to be torn down, and so we're reusing those bricks, and they're not immediately pretty. I mean, to be honest, and you just need to accept it because that's what's there. And I think that's a new. I would probably, to be honest, like if you asked me 10 years ago, I would probably get past it if it wasn't aesthetically part of my idea. I would probably push it aside. And I think today I just have to accept it and somehow make it into. You have to love it, right? It's like there has to be part of your expression. And I do think that like the timber sometimes is really chunky, and it's not really the elegance that I would have if I had the choice. But I don't think we have a choice, so we need to kind of find the best material, and that it comes with a price sometimes. You could see the chunky timber interior because otherwise you need to clad it in fireproof material, etc. Yeah, and that's sometimes I think it's tough to accept, but you just need to. Yeah.
Hi, Dorte. Thank you so much for this presentation today. I think my question and also the curiosity is born out of two things. One is about a year ago, as part of Grace and James's studio, we actually got to visit one of your projects in Copenhagen. Actually, more than one, but this particular one that struck me was the neighborhood center and the quaint little entry that is actually set about these columns. And one is that, and the second driver is the genealogy of the projects that were presented today, which were much more in a stronger relationship to the natural landscape around. And I'm wondering, especially with the kind of intriguing take that you have, which is keeping your sensitive kind of a drive for the projects away, how that would maybe translate into some of the projects that you had probably undertaken earlier, which was much more community driven. So I'm kind of, I think, curious to know how you would operate, and of course an urban setting, which is in a city as Copenhagen, but also which has a much more closer, I think, relationship to human relations.
Yeah, the little the neighborhood center is like the first building we did, so 25 years ago, and I think a lot, of course, a lot has changed, but also I think we're still not community driven, but we are very much driven by the possibility of always creating something that's not paid for, I mean, to give something. I mean, it's really banal to say to give something back, but in a way, we're always looking for opportunity to, either create public space or creating, any possibility of, in a way, opening up a building, creating a public space, creating something that's more than the program. So I think that's always been really important to kind of find that. I think it's also like clever, what can we get out of what we have? So I think also I think we're still working a lot with that approach that we need to get the most out of the least, budget-wise, or is there a site where we could push it to the edge? I think that's that's still very much an important part of the work we do. I mean, this is landscape projects, and maybe it's not really, maybe it's a little bit misleading because we do a lot of urban projects also, and they look very different. So it was just to keep a red thread between the projects. Did I answer the question, or did I just take off somewhere? Okay.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, I have a question here in the way back here
sorry.
in the corner. So when I look at your projects that you've shown, you talked about the like ceilings and floors and things. But when I look at your projects, there's a poetics to the landscape projects, which have infinity, this sort of an infinite quality to them. And when I look at them, there's an element of vocabulary that I would almost use versus floor, ceiling, wall. That to me is I guess seems to be the driving force. So there's an element of flow, element of infinity, and I'm just wondering how much vocabulary comes into it as you're describing the landscapes that you're bringing these buildings, or forms, I should say, out of, how much that actually comes into play when you're coming into thinking about the design, I guess, of the process, because there's sort of that nomadic flow as well, as you talked about the Inuit culture. And it seems to flow better than those structures that were brought in that are much more stoic, stayed. But I'm sorting what the vocabulary is that you might design with.
Thank you. I think that was a very deep remark somehow. I think what I've always been very, when I started out, my first project, my thesis project, was a mobile theater to kind of be, around Europe on trucks and, open up and close. And I am actually, I have been totally obsessed with architecture that could change, or open and close and move around, and being on wheels. So I think that's. I know it's too expensive. Now I'm too old and too wise to. I know it's far too expensive, but it's still kind of something that I really love, this kind of the moving architecture. And I also think the dynamics of space, how to create something that's as dynamic as possible within the framework of whatever square meters you have, is important. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I understand that it's about the rhythm and the infinity in a way. You can do that in a landscape, but I think when you're in the city, it's much more confined or enclosed or embraced. But there's still kind of a dynamic on the interior that I think is important. I probably didn't answer very well, but
Thank you so much, Dorte.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Terrific.